Welcome to Littleton Live. I'm your host, Nicole Viagioni. The objective of this program is to have discussions about topics that affect us here in Littleton. We welcome your calls each week and look forward to having a meaningful dialogue with you about specific topics that we will discuss. Tonight, our topic is, should the town of Littleton ban the sale of certain vaping products? We want to hear your opinions on this topic. If you would like to be a part of the discussion, give us a call at 978-540-2487. If you call and are put on the air, please turn down your TV set because there's a slight delay in what you're seeing in the direct phone line to the studio. Also, if you get a busy signal or a recorded message, please hang up and try again later. So, the phone lines are open. While we wait for our first call, let me welcome to the studio DJ Wilson. He is the Tobacco Control Director for the Massachusetts Municipal Association. Welcome, DJ.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. So, first and foremost, please introduce yourself and give us a little history and what you do at the Massachusetts Municipal Association.
Sure. So, Mass Municipal Association, or MMA, is a membership organization for local officials. So Littleton is a dues-paying member, and we represent town managers as well as select boards in towns. So what I do at the MMA is I provide technical assistance to cities and towns who want to adopt tobacco control policies. And this is under a Department of Public Health grant. And how this all came about was that 26 years ago, the voters of Massachusetts voted yes for a referendum question that raised the price of cigarette tax by 25 cents. That 25 cents generated $1 million every 3 days. So the Department of Public Health was charged with starting a tobacco control program, and they got out lots of money to cities and towns and Board of Health grants, statewide programs such as myself. Some people may remember that we had lots of television commercials on. We had ads in newspapers. We did a lot of education in schools. And that money eventually got cut. And so at our height, we were about 52 million, and we are currently at about 4.5 million.
Okay.
So the three objectives that we started with at the tobacco control program at the state level were to keep kids from starting smoking, encourage current smokers to quit, and to reduce secondhand smoke exposure as much as possible. And so in the early years, and we recognize that boards of health they can rely on a state law that lets them enact reasonable health regulations. So in the early years, we were busy doing the good battle, getting cities and towns to do a local tobacco sales permit, ban vending machines, limit self-service displays, limit smoking to, the bar area of a restaurant was a big deal back then. And so, we've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this job for 25 years. And so then in 2004, we had enough cities and towns that really tipped the balance up at the State House to pass a state law that made all restaurants, bars, workplaces smoke-free. And so it has a handful of exemptions, and cities and towns are welcome to get rid of those exemptions if they choose to do so. So in a way, we've kind of solved the secondhand smoke problem mostly, and now Bay Staters enjoy just going anywhere and not ever being subjected to smoke. And in fact, we hear, you'll hear from people saying, "Oh, I went to Louisiana and walked into a restaurant and it was smoky, and I don't remember ever." That is so long ago from what we're used to here in Massachusetts. So one of the interesting things with that, though, is so we have secondhand smoke over here, and then we work on limiting the sales of these products and making sure kids can't get them over here. So one of the problems, though, is that non-smokers who would walk into a smoky restaurant would be quick to complain, and rightly so.
Yeah.
But non-smokers today don't ever kind of go into a convenience store. You pay for your gas at the pump. You probably get a gallon of milk at the supermarket. So you never go into the convenience store, which is really where the tobacco industry has focused a lot of their sales power in the last decade. And so that's why we've been working. Our sales sample has about 40 moving parts to it. And so that's what cities and towns have been grappling with over the last decade. And then all of a sudden, so we've had a steady decline in smoking in the general population and in high schools throughout the state. And that's all of a sudden when we saw vaping come in and start reversing those gains.
Yeah. So I guess, what is vaping? I know what vaping
Sure.
is, but
Sure. So I have here kind of a little bit of the history of vaping. It is always a matter of it being a battery and a cartridge that holds a solution that contains nicotine. So it's a lithium battery, and that's one of the problems when you hear now and then it blew up in someone's pocket or in their face. So when you draw on it, there's an atomizer inside that makes a mist out of the liquid, and that's what the user draws in and inhales. So in the early days, they looked like cigarette. The very first ones were like $100 a piece,
yeah,
so
that was
they're
like
expensive.
the blue.
And then there were ones that looked just like metal
Yeah.
cigarettes. And then we started seeing what are called mods or tank systems. And those are the big systems that you'll see people walking around with. And they would fill them with these solutions on their own. And you'll still see people using them. So this particular, I have Sweet Tarts, bubble gum, and the third one is cotton candy. So, but the problem that we had with, there's a problem with all these, but this generation, one of the problems we had was mixing was taking place in stores, and people were just using their bare hands and mixing it up. Nicotine on its own is a pesticide, and it is dangerous.
Yeah.
It goes through your skin if you spill it on you. And we had 3 girls who were on a Brockton school bus one day. One of them had a bottle just like this, and they put drops on their tongue, and they had to be taken to the emergency room.
Love
but they
that.
they were fine.
Yeah.
But so the Attorney General, actually, in this state, set down some real parameters that you can't do this in-store mixing.
Yeah.
And about the same time that happened is when more streamlined products came on the market, and Juul is the big one. Juul, kids will call using a Juul, juuling.
Never thought we would make Julian
And
a
so
verb.
this is a Juul. So,
Put it right there.
okay, so this is the body. This is the battery, the lithium battery. And you would add your cartridge to the top of it. And the cartridge contains the liquid, and it snaps in, and then you can use it. This one I've carried around for a while, so it's dead. But so these are what come in different flavors. And so these are what the pods look like in mint. And this is mango. So sometimes you will probably see around in the general vicinity of high schools these thrown into the gutters.
This one's
So when you're done, see that's the problem. When you
That's
carry it
all,
long
yeah.
enough, they'll start leaking. So when you're done, you throw this away and you replace it with another one. When this is low and running out of juice, you attach this and you attach it to your computer. So what we've
literally is
heard,
a flash drive.
right? So one of the things that we've heard is from both high school librarians and from public librarians is that kids will come in and get the loaner computer just to really juice up their Juul.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it does look like a flash drive, and there's other brands out there that also look very different from what you'd imagine the old-timey metal cigarette that was the original e-cigarette. So it's easy to see how it can fool a parent into not knowing what it is. What makes Juul very different is that in addition to it being a very sleek design that doesn't look like a cigarette, is that the company figured out how to use what's called nicotine salts in this solution. So you get the hit quicker, and in this very pod, according to their own website, equals the equivalent of 20 cigarettes. So it's a more powerful device. And one of the difficulties that we have with this is that everybody knows cigarette smokers determine how much they smoke by the number of sticks they use in the course of a
Because
day.
you can visibly see it. Yeah.
Correct. So people say, I'm a half a pack a day smoker, I only smoke 4 a day. And so that's how they determine how much nicotine they've been getting. And with this, it's hard to know if for someone quitting and they switch to this, yes, they won't get the nicotine and tar, but they will get other dangers that are just emerging now. But one of the problems is that they won't know if they're actually increasing their nicotine addiction or decreasing it.
Yeah.
Because it's used so differently. It's apples and oranges. So sometimes you'll see people with these around their neck. So if they're doing this all the time,
Yeah.
they're actually getting more nicotine than they would if they smoked half a pack a day. So, and then if you're a dual user and you use this when you're in a place that you can't smoke, but then go outside and have your cigarette, then you're
Yeah.
really ramping up your nicotine addiction. So with kids, the unfortunate part is that kids' brains are more susceptible to addiction than adults. So this has turned out to be a big problem in schools throughout the United States.
So, speaking of kids, I had the chance to talk to the Littleton Middle School teacher, a health teacher, one of my personal favorite teachers from Littleton Public School, and she has a few words to say on this too. So let's go to that real quick. I guess, how does vaping affect teens? I feel like that's the same question.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I think my biggest concern is that it is a gateway drug. So
Yeah.
we know the 3 gateway drugs are going to be nicotine, alcohol, and marijuana. So whenever something is a gateway drug, it makes you more susceptible to other drugs out there. So if we have teens that are experimenting with nicotine, they're more likely to experiment with other drugs. It doesn't mean that they definitely will, but they are more likely to. My other concern is that there has been a link with nicotine and the depression, nicotine and anxiety. That's concerning. I'm very concerned with that.
Yeah, and the unforeseen future that's coming.
Yeah, the lab rats and
Yeah.
the guinea pigs, and how I think we just need to be more proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah, so why do you think kids and teens started vaping? Is it the flavors, or did they want to do it to be cool, like how my parents did it for drinking or whatever?
Yeah, I think that it's a whole bunch of different reasons. I think the cool factor is a big thing. It's trendy. I think social media contributes to that too. There's something called indirect advertising.
Yeah.
And with that indirect advertising, these kids are looking at their favorite YouTubers or their Instagrammers, and they're holding Juuls, and they think that they're so cool, so they want to be like them. So I think that's a big factor of what's contributing to it. The flavors are definitely targeting young people. I don't know many adults that are into the Fruit Loops flavored Juul pods or the cotton candy or the gummy bear. Like those are some of the flavors. Skittles is a flavor.
Oh, yeah.
Like I don't know many adults that are going to be like, yeah, give me the Fruit Loops flavored. This is targeting young people. And they know they're targeting young people because they want to get them hooked. We know that kids that start using nicotine products before the age of 19 are more likely to become addicted. And I don't know for sure the statistic, but it's pretty high. They are more likely. So they know if they can get these kids to start using their nicotine product, they got them hooked.
Yeah, and once you're hooked, you're...
Yep. I mean, for my generation, it was Joe Camel. He was the cool cartoon character. Everybody wanted to be like Joe Camel. So, and they had giveaways, with T-shirts with Joe Camel, and that was appealing towards kids. Kids like cartoons. An interesting study that I read years ago was that Joe Camel was more recognizable than Mickey Mouse.
Really?
That's scary.
Yeah.
That is so scary. And that's even like young kids now. My son's 13 and he knows what a Juul pod looks like. He knows it looks like a USB, thing. Like he knows, like, who's it targeting?
Yeah. So if an age limit doesn't stop kids from juuling, then what's going to stop them?
Well, I think it has to be a combination of so many things. Let's go back to like cigarettes. How did we get the people to quit smoking cigarettes? Because the number of people who were smoking cigarettes did decline, which was great. Education, you're in my class.
Oh,
knowledge is
of course.
power,
Yeah.
Like the sooner we can start educating people and we can give people that knowledge to take ownership of their own well-being, then they'll make healthier choices. But what else can we do to help them make better and healthier choices is like get rid of those flavors, like just don't have them accessible, that just don't have them, and if we don't have them, then they're not going to try them. So I think that there's a lot to do with education. I think that, some people will say taxing them.
Yeah.
We did that with cigarettes. We put an extra tax on cigarettes, that might help. But I do think just creating more awareness.
Yeah.
For years you saw more anti-smoking commercials. We need to see anti-juuling commercials or
Yeah.
anti-vaping commercials. That's what we need to see. So I think just creating more awareness and education and knowledge and just making it a little bit more difficult for people to have access to it.
Yeah, so kind of shifting to Littleton. So with the public schools, how have they been affected by the vaping dilemma?
So I can't really speak for the high school, but
Yeah.
for the middle school, I know that, we're on top of it. We've educated the teachers on what to look for, what the devices look like. I know Miss Perry, she's the Littleton High School health teacher, and myself have gone to several trainings. Many towns, the SRO officers have gone to the trainings too. We have to remember that our school is already a drug-free zone.
Yeah.
So it's the same rules that are following. If, those e-cigarettes or the juuling devices are found, it's the same consequences as if tobacco is found,
Yeah.
or alcohol is found. So just keeping that enforcement of those policies.
Yeah. What final note do you want to leave with the viewers?
I have you know me, I talk a lot. I just think that we as a community have a moral and ethical obligation to promote the well-being and the health of everyone. And if we can do that by banning these flavored cigarettes and creating more awareness of the harmfulness of e-cigarettes, then we need to do that. That's what I think.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Anytime. And again, I'm not that expert, but I do think that this is just history repeating itself. And we learned a lot from the cigarettes. Over close to 500,000 people a year die due to tobacco-related illnesses. I don't want to see that happen with these e-cigarettes.
Yeah, so let's hope we can cut it in the bud.
Let's hope so. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, she's right on point, and a couple other things just to augment what she said was, number one, when I said there are like 40 moving parts to our sales reg, and it's because there is no magic bullet to solve this problem. So people think that the industry will say, well, the state went to age 21, minimum age. That's enough. We're done. And it isn't done. If that was the only thing that we needed to do, we would have done it 2 decades ago. But there's a million different things that need to get done. And it is education, policies. It's a bunch of different policies to really. We play this whack-a-mole game, and we admit in tobacco control that we are never ahead of the tobacco industry. Right now, they are focus grouping the next generation of Juul or whatever it may be. In fact, 30% of Juul was just bought by Philip Morris, so they're in cahoots now, and they're going to start figuring out the next product that'll be used to addict the next generation. And I think the other thing that's important to remember is that when she was talking about it being a gateway drug, there's evidence that shows that's true. I think one of the things that's been different with Juul compared to past efforts that we've made is that the heroin problem nationwide has gotten much more attention because it all of a sudden started affecting suburbs and suburban kids and like the kid who lived next door. It wasn't the kids who were slouching in the back row of the classroom. And the same thing's happening with this. The school officials that are catching kids doing Juul are, grade A students, the quarterback, the cheerleading squad. I mean, they're catching everybody. So that's what's really making people stand up and think about this. We had a kid's mother testify at the State House that he lost his scholarship to college because he was kicked off of, I forget the team that he was on, but the team that he was on. And so this is bubbling up faster because it's not the typical kid who gets in trouble all the time.
Exactly.
It's the perfectly fine kid who just thought Juul Juul sounded like a cool thing to do and tasted delicious.
Yeah, I mean, Juul, that sounds like a cool name, I guess.
Right.
So if you have an opinion, please come on the show and voice it. The number is 978-540-2487. So I have a few graphics to show you, and this is specifically at Littleton High School. If you were a Littleton High School student, like I was, each year or each 2 years, you would take a Emerson Hospital survey based off, and they'd ask you a bunch of questions, whether it was on alcohol, drugs, and now they've added juuling to this. So the first graphic I'm going to show you guys is the average, over the course of years, how much smoking cigarettes have gone. And you can see a gradual decline. It's almost like a step ladder going all the way down. And I mean, that's the goal of educating people about cigarettes. But then when you go to the juuling portion of this, it's the exact opposite, where you see a stark increase where 34% of high school seniors and 33% of juniors and so on are using Juul. So it's just, you can see the trend increasing over time, which, I mean, that's...
Yeah, so this is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey.
Yeah.
And so one of the difficulties with it is that it takes a year or two to get a question even on to ask what students were doing with vaping. And then when we finally got the question on, you know, it was not uncommon to walk up to a kid and said, "Do you smoke?" "Oh, I would never do that. That's gross."
Yeah.
"Do you vape?" "Oh, I don't vape either,
Yeah.
but I Juul." So we weren't even asking the right question.
Yeah.
You know, so we were behind the 8 ball and even figuring that out. By the time we figured that out, every principal had a drawer full of Juuls.
Yeah.
So that is one of the difficulties with this kind of whack-a-mole problem, is that kids, you know, Juul can advertise on television because they are not subjected to the same federal limitations that cigarettes and cigars are. But they're not advertising on NBC, CBS. They know to go after to advertise on the channels and the shows and the websites that kids are using.
Yeah.
So, you know, as an adult, I don't even see them, right?
What was the intention of e-cigarettes and Juuls before it became this trend?
So there is there is a group of people out there who do believe that it is a very effective way to quit using cigarettes, and that, you know, smoking regular tobacco is a very dirty process. It has a lot of tar, it has a lot of chemicals in it, it has a lot of toxic parts to it, and that's what causes heart disease, lung cancer, and all the rest. So so e-cigarette aficionados will say, well, but so this is better. And it may be better because it doesn't have tar in it, at least. But you're dealing with something that's truly awful, cigarettes. So, you know, if I compared, you know, having a big shot of whiskey every day, well, it's better than me drinking Roundup. That's true.
Yeah.
But there's still problems with these cigarettes.
Yeah.
And so some of the problems are that some people won't quit on them, especially if they're using a flavor they love. If you could just suck in Boston cream pie all day long, then you may never need to quit. And so they'll have years of use that we won't know what that means.
So the
A
flavors.
couple of the problems are that the solutions are not regulated by the federal government. Some of the flavors are inert as a liquid, but when you heat them up, they become dangerous. It's kind of like cocoa is you can eat cocoa in a brownie, but burn it and inhale through your lungs, not good. And then the heat that's produced in making this aerosol actually kind of minutely shaves off metals in the actual device itself. So people are inhaling ever so slight, minute parts of metals, because most of these are also not made in the United States.
Yeah,
So, you know, I'm sure there's a doctor out there that says, I have a patient who's been smoking for 40 years and he switched to
e-cigarettes.
e-cigarette. He's like, it's better.
Yeah.
But the problem is, for every patient that's like that, who's an adult who's aiming to switch to better themselves by getting away from cigarettes and onto e-cigarettes, we're finding about 6 kids starting anew. And so, the harm reduction is the term, isn't that great if you have 6 new nicotine-addicted kids for every smoker who's making a quit attempt doing this. There's not much, we have found the best way to quit would be using a patch or Nicorette gum in addition to counseling. And so we're finding when you just do patch or Nicorette gum alone, that the quit rates are no better or worse if you use e-cigarettes. But so it is a way to quit.
Yeah.
My advice to people who've gone this route and think it's a good idea, drop the flavor, switch to tobacco flavored
Yeah.
E-cigarettes, because it won't be that enjoyable, and you'll just be using it to get your nicotine level back up. And I
Yeah.
think that would promote actual quitting it altogether. So that's the quandary we're in. Is if they have this explosion of use in high schools, it's just not going to matter that much if you got 40 people in Littleton to stop smoking.
Yeah.
If you have 200 kids at the high school vaping.
Yeah. So never mind, we have a call.
Yeah.
Hi, Wendy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for calling. If you have a question, a comment, concern, the floor is yours.
Awesome. So I'm watching this, and I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, so I'm like totally against it. It really upsets me that all these kids are doing this, especially when we know from history how bad cigarettes are for kids. And, my father smokes. My father-in-law smokes now like a chimney, and it's just awful. I mean, he cannot stop, and he has a really bad heart condition, and he just won't stop. It's terrible. But my kind of question, concern is, so we banned these Juul vaping things from Littleton, and then I know it comes back. What is the difference between that and marijuana? Like, what is the difference between that and then having marijuana in our town?
Sure. So we actually have no city or town in Massachusetts that has outright banned the sale of electronic cigarettes. So what our recommendation is to move them to adult-only retail tobacco stores. So these are places that are specialty shops. It's the tobacconists that we know and love from the 60s and 70s, to specialized shops that sell almost exclusively vape and or tobacco products. Because that way we can control the number of locations that sell. We can keep a close eye on them. For example, I live in Malden. We have 62,000 people and 58 tobacco vendors. So that far exceeds the number of liquor vendors we have, and it'll far exceed the number of recreational marijuana shops we'll ever have. But we do have a policy in place that says you have to sell all this stuff in those stores. So we only have 5 of these retail tobacco stores. We had one sell twice. The story was that a kid his mother caught the Uber bill that the kid had taken an Uber twice to the city of Malden to go to this one vape shop to buy vape where he knew he could buy.
My God.
So he had been caught twice in a compliance check. The Board of Health gave him a 1-week suspension, and they literally had to shut their door for a week because they had nothing else to sell. So our goal is to limit the number of places that can sell these products. We can keep a closer eye on them, and then the penalty for them is much stricter than a regular convenience store who'd have to get rid of their tobacco products but would still be able to stay open and sell a lot of other things. So we actually look at the marijuana shops and kind of a little puzzled on tobacco control front, because we have people who oversee. The city of Boston has 840 tobacco vendors.
Yeah.
Boston will probably never have more than like 20 marijuana shops. And to us in tobacco control, that's an easy thing to keep a lid on.
Yeah, 'cause that's so small.
840 is massive. 20, nothing. So, our recommendation to cities and towns is you get to shape what that marijuana shop looks like because none are opened now. In tobacco, we're always doing this retroactively, but you get to shape what it looks like. You get to read them the Riot Act from the very beginning, and you should be able to shut them down if they get caught. And that's a big deal for them, and I recommend that cities and towns just be really on the dime with these new marijuana shops, because we constantly are playing this kind of game with retailers, but we have lots of cities and towns, and Boston is actually one of them. They do compliance checks on tobacco. They are not afraid to give out permit suspensions at all. And when you do that, it sends a clear message to the rest of the vendors that they have to pay attention.
So is that what happens? Is that how these kids are getting them? They can just go in and buy them from the store?
From general retailers, yes. So, people will fight about where kids are getting these things. The industry will say it's all online, and we say it's more of a balance of kids getting it online, but at local retailers. So we do compliance checks, but the compliance checks are done with a kid who's usually not from the town. So they're a stranger to the retailer, and they can't lie. So I suspect what ends up happening, two things that we don't catch really well are kids who are known entities in their stores get sold to because they're known entities. They know the kid is not doing a compliance check. Or they ask an adult to go in and buy them.
Yeah.
One thing that has recently happened that's been interesting is in Brookline, who entertained one of these policies, the convenience store said, well, what if we do this, we'll do this volunteer thing that we will only sell a pack of these pods to one customer per day. We generally don't ever see volunteer policies going well.
Yeah.
But one of the things that it really struck us was that that meant that somebody was going into their stores and buying several of these a day.
So then they could sell them to other people, yeah.
And so this represents 4 packs of cigarettes. So
Yeah.
the consumer wasn't using it, whether the purchaser was an adult or a kid. They weren't the end user. So somebody was walking in and buying several of these in the course of a day, and you are right, probably going off to the high school and reselling them to their friends.
Yeah. Wendy, do you have any other questions?
No, that's good. I'll let somebody else have some airtime, but it's just disappointing. It's disappointing that
It
it's
is.
disappointing to me that kids are now doing this again. I mean, they're always going to do something. And I mean, I have 2 kids, and they just see their grandfather smoke, and it's the best. It's the best deterrent because they're like, we'll never smoke. I mean.
And that you are correct. We've done a fantastic job, like I said earlier. These same kids who are using Juuls would say, I would never smoke. Unfortunately, when they're out and this is empty, they'll bum a cigarette, is our biggest fear. And, one of our jobs is, you are correct, that, it's human nature to try new things. But if we can get them to not try it till they're like mid-20s, the chances of them getting addicted is far lower. And even if they get addicted, they'll quit faster than if they, because we hear the highly addicted people who are now, 50 and up, started at 12, 13, 14.
Yeah.
And so just moving that ball up to an older age just results in less addiction. So that's one of the challenges that we have.
Yeah.
All righty, well,
thanks for your
thank
time.
you.
All right.
Have a good night.
Hey, thanks, Nicole.
Bye. I feel with the tobacco industry, I feel we make progress and we go 2 steps forward, but then something new like the Juul comes out, and then we go 3 steps back, and we could just never keep up with.
Well, yeah, but that is the nature of
Yeah.
nature of the problem, and the same thing happens with, the same thing happens in the liquor industry.
Yeah.
Four Loko was adding caffeine to their drinks.
Of course, yeah.
Now we have flavored vodkas out there that come in the same cotton candy that
Pink
I
lemonade.
just showed you,
oh,
pink lemonade
yeah.
and all that. So so those industries are always moving on, and the same thing with the food industry, right? I mean, the amount of salt and fat and the sizes that we get today compared to what was available in the 70s and 80s is far different.
Yeah.
And so it is this constant, to use it again, whack-a-mole to try to shape what's in the retail environment, kind of convince the general public to be careful about some of these products is an ongoing issue with public health, prevention altogether. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a line open if you're interested in calling, voicing your opinion, comment, concern. Give us a call at 978-540-2487. So I guess this is kind of a loaded question with the word I'm about to use here, but which is less harmless? And that's the big word. Is it e-cigarettes? Is it cigarettes?
Yeah, I mean, as I spoke of earlier, I mean, cigarettes are still the dirtiest thing that you could find.
Yeah.
And next up, I know that a lot of cigar smokers will say, oh, I don't inhale, but cigar and chew,
Yeah.
like this, which comes in mint flavor, that's parked, both of those are parked on your lips and your mouth, and we see mouth cancer, lip cancer, and that kind of thing. So, as I said earlier, like the previous caller, if her elderly father has heart problems, talking to the doctor, it's not an FDA approved device, so I don't know what doctors can say, but they may say it might be better. You'll always be nicotine addicted the rest of your life, but if we could get you off your cigarettes after 50 years, maybe we can just better your current heart problem. I don't know if it's going to make his life go longer. Yeah. But it'll make the rest of his life better. I mean, one of the problems that people talk about is that they'll say, well, I know somebody who lived to 80 and they smoke cigarettes, but a lot of times that 80-year-old didn't just go to sleep and die in their sleep. It's it's 10, 15 years of dragging around oxygen tank.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, when you think of it, there was nobody back in, like, say, 1990 can remember a house getting oxygen delivered to them.
Yeah.
But that's all COPD, and that's from smoking. So in those limited instances, vaping might be preferable.
Yeah. So why do you think people are anti-cigarette but pro-vape? You see it, everybody's like, oh, vape's so good, and like we just discussed before.
Because we've done a pretty good job of demonizing cigarettes, right? So people won't put up with someone lighting up a cigarette in a bar or a restaurant. We did a really good job of doing a lot of education back for the first 15 years of the program, of saying cigarettes are bad, and that's why we have kids today sucking on a Juul who's alleged they'll never touch a cigarette. Yeah. So we've done a pretty good job of demonizing that part of the industry, but the industry then works to move it around. Let me give you a little history on cigarette, cigar.
Go ahead, yeah.
So in 2009, we had at that time seen only tobacco-flavored cigarettes and then menthol cigarettes. And so R.J. Reynolds came out with some flavors for their Camel line. Yeah. And so the U.S. Food and Drug Administration pounced on that and put out a regulation pretty quickly that's banned the sale of flavored cigarettes. So, all of a sudden, there may have been dreams and all these cigarette manufacturers, CEOs had to have these to make their products flavored. They were stopped.
Yeah, mango flavored.
They exempted, by the way, menthol in this. Yeah. So immediately we started seeing these same cigarette manufacturers buy up cigar companies. Yeah. Because cigars weren't covered by this. So that's when we actually saw, in the 90s, an explosion of flavored cigar use in high schools. Yeah. And people buying, grape cigars this big and making blunts out of them. Oh, lovely. Splitting it open, mixing it with marijuana, putting it back together. And so, we started, this is grape, this is chocolate, this is cherry tipped, this is pink berry. So we saw them shift the product all to cigars. And more insidious was like these 2 packs are both grape, and they both have 20 sticks in them, and both of them do look like. And if you looked at it, it looked like a brown cigarette.
Yeah.
But what they did is that because they call themselves cigars, they got around the federal limitation on no flavored cigarettes. And because they actually weigh a little more than the average cigarette, they actually get out of the Massachusetts cigarette tax. So I bought this pack for $2.25, which today a pack of Marlboros goes between $9 and $10.
Yeah, that's
So in an effort to work on that, we started working on minimum pricing for cigars because they're usually a lot cheaper. A cigar like this chocolate cigar, you could probably the store owner probably could buy for about a quarter, and they could sell them as low as 40 cents. Kids are price sensitive. Almost every kid has a 40 cents sitting in their pocket. So we did minimum pricing on these cigars, and we started, and we always wanted to do something about the flavors. Like, it was great that the flavored cigarettes were gone, but we wanted to do more. But we always thought there would be a lawsuit, and we're always concerned about getting cities and towns in Massachusetts into a lawsuit.
yeah.
Well, at the height of the recession, the federal government offered major cities a grant if they did one innovative policy. So the city of Boston got money and did that minimum pricing for cigars. So what happened in Boston is that this cigar, then the minimum price had to be at least $2.50,
Yeah.
and then multi-packs had to be at least $2.50 or $5, depending on the city or town. So we got the prices up a little higher, closer to a pack of cigarettes, making it a little less interesting for kids. The city of Providence, Rhode Island, got their grant, and they took that 2009 federal government prohibition on flavored cigarettes, and they expanded it to cigars, cigarillos, spit, chew, and to vaping liquids, vaping solutions. They were sued immediately by the federal court, court by the whole tobacco industry. And so, but at the Federal Court of Appeals, Providence won, and that didn't go to the U.S. Supreme Court. We're in the same court jurisdiction as Rhode Island, so it gave a big green light for cities and towns to go forward. So we now currently have 162 cities and towns that have adopted at least the Providence language.
Yeah. And if we could-
Littleton is not one of them.
Yes. So here's the interesting part, because you came to one of the Board of Health meetings discussing that we should be one of these towns. So I have a list of all of the towns so far that have.
Yep.
All right, and it's a bunch of towns, and if you can see, Westford's one of them. Air's one of them.
Everybody but Littleton has it in place, except for Acton, and Acton has a hearing mid-September.
So they're on the track as well.
Yeah. So, and then if you look at this, just looking at this list, those that are bolded are city forms of government. So Boston and Worcester do have this in place. Lowell does as well. And then, as I said, everybody abutting you does as well. The ones that are underlined have gone further because the Providence original policy did exempt, just like the federal government, mint, menthol, and wintergreen. The underlined ones have unexempted those 3 flavors. It's a big deal because things like grape cigars and chocolate cigars and cotton candy vape are bizarre.
Yeah.
But menthol's been around for as long as everybody watching this program has been alive.
I mean, I can get a cough drop that's in the flavor of menthol, yeah.
Right. So it represents about 30% of cigarette sales nationwide is menthol. The most popular flavor for Juul is mint after mango. So, and it's it makes sense. menthol, as you were just mentioning, a cough
Yeah.
drop, soothes your throat.
Yeah.
So if you're smoking a cigarette for the very first time, you will cough less using a menthol
Menthol.
cigarette. You will cough less using a mint Juul. You'll cough less if you have mint spit in your mouth.
Yeah.
So this is a big leap forward for these cities and towns, and of the 13 that have done this, 7 are being sued at the moment.
Okay. So I wanted to show, you were talking about flavors, so I just wanted to show the viewers at home 2 things. The first one is where you can get, where there's certain flavors that we were talking about. So mint was one of them, and then you have like tobacco flavored, mango, cucumber. So it comes in cream.
Yep.
And then, so the interesting thing with Juul, especially, if I try to go to their specific website, once it loads, this pops up, and then it asks me, oh, am I 21? I'm not 21, so we're going to go to this. And the interesting thing here is it gives us a smoke-free teen website where you shouldn't be addicted to nicotine and whatnot. And so I find that, oh, they're trying to dissuade, and I use that in quotes, dissuade you from using their product, but at the same time, they're just like, oh, if kids use it, it's not a big deal.
It's lovely that they put it out there, but we have long had the problem where the tobacco industry puts out, kids shouldn't smoke. It's an adult thing.
Oh, it's not,
Yeah.
exactly.
So they're doing their best to make it look like they care, but it's actually enticing kids to do so more. It is good that Juul, we get a lot of complaints from retailers that kids buy it online. Mm-hmm. No doubt that happens. Juul has 75% of the market, and them and the other 4 larger manufacturers were told by FDA to tighten up their online system for buying. So I believe that they have. I don't doubt that a kid can get around it, and I don't doubt that somebody is getting cases of Juul delivered to the basement of their house, and they have their own little website, and they're doing it on their own. So it is constantly an effort that the Attorney General here in Massachusetts has given cease and desist letters to a handful of online internet users. I hope that the federal government keeps on bearing down and making sure that their online procedures are strict and don't allow kids to buy. And the other thing that's interesting is that if you pick up a Juul, it's so tiny. But right down here is a unique code that tells that is unique to this particular device in my hand.
There, okay.
So that does mean that Juul has the capacity of knowing that if they're sending 10 cases of Juul to some private home
Yeah.
in Littleton, Massachusetts, that it's likely that it's being resold.
Yeah.
So they have the capacity to look into that and stop that from happening. You know, we run into that problem in the tobacco industry. You know, some little store in North Carolina gets 1 million cases of cigarettes, puts them in the back of an 18-wheeler, then resells them on the streets of Fall River.
Yeah.
Philip Morris, there's unique numbers in all those packs too. Philip Morris knows what's happening, and so does Juul here. So hopefully Juul steps up their game and stops selling en masse huge amounts of their product to other internet sellers that
Yeah.
they know are out there.
So you mentioned earlier about filling the pods. Would it be possible for people to put CBD oil and
Or THC.
THC? Yeah, sorry, THC.
Both.
Yes.
Yes. So the tank systems where you would fill it up with your own thing here, one of the problems that we always had was that you could have somebody using a tank system next to you at a bar, and you don't know what they boiled on their stovetop and put inside the tank.
Yeah.
And so, so early on we thought that these pods were kind of, you couldn't do anything about them. They were self-contained. But in fact, if you go, 2 things. You can go on YouTube and learn how to insert THC into that.
DIY project right,
That's right.
there.
But there are also Juul-compatible pods out there that you can probably buy online illegally that have THC in them. I do not know if there are illegal ones being sold at marijuana shops in Massachusetts. I do not know. So this is a growing problem. the Marlboro superintendent attended a Board of Health meeting and said last school year, 4 kids were taken out in ambulances for having used too much of a THC product in
Oh,
their
lovely.
Juul.
Yeah.
There was a South Shore principal that said, I think he said, we had like 16 expulsion hearings, 15 were about THC in Juuling pods. So it's school systems all recognize this being a problem.
Yeah.
And they are trying to control for it. But it's difficult. It's difficult in part because in reality, for people who have medical marijuana use for true medical problems,
Yeah.
this probably is the cleanest way for them to deliver THC
Yeah.
for pain relief. But obviously it's not. We don't love to see high school kids being using it.
Exactly. I mean, when high school kids are using it and when people need it for medicinal use, they're kind of ruining the purpose of it.
Right, exactly. So one thing with age 21, though, is that it now aligns marijuana, alcohol, and
Yeah.
tobacco are all 21.
And interesting, it's a great thing that you brought that up because I know when I was going into my end of freshman year, first semester, there's a bill that came out saying that when it was moved up to 21, are the kids like 19, 20, are they grandfathered in? Like, how does that work?
It's a confusing part of the state law.
Yeah.
So the state law put into place that we will go to age 21 in a 3-year step-up process, which is
Yeah.
exactly the way alcohol happened in Massachusetts back when I was about that age.
Yeah.
Because for 10 months out of the year I could legally buy, but then I couldn't for 2 months of the year because of the step-up process.
Yeah.
So they mimicked that process, and they thought that was a good idea. So, but what they did say to in that bill, which became law, they said, but any city or town that goes to age 21 before December 31st of 2018 can be at 21. So we saw a real rush of cities and towns putting it in place. So right now, 93% of the state's population lives in cities and towns that are at age 21, and Littleton is one of them.
Yeah.
So for those towns that are right now that didn't do that in time, they have to follow the state law. So right now it's age 19. January 1st will be age 20, and then the following.
I think
it'll be 21.
Sturbridge is one of those towns.
It could be. I mean, it was a lot of small towns, I
Yeah.
should say. Most large. I'm not sure. There's probably only 1 or 2 cities that didn't do it.
Yeah.
But the top 10 cities and towns are at 21.
Yeah.
So population-wise, it's just a small fraction. But you are correct that kids will find the
They're going to find
towns
ways.
in fact, I don't doubt that somewhere out there that someone has made a website listing the
Oh, yeah.
cities and towns in Massachusetts that are at 19 today.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
sure, I don't know, they might go over the state border if something's like not the same, say New Hampshire or Connecticut. If something's like
Right.
different there, they might go there.
Yes, what we do hope, and all these things is what we do hope is that getting back to those original principles of the state program we do hope it thwarts kids from trying to start, right? If they can't get their hands on it, hopefully it just thwarts them, even if it's for a couple years until
Yeah.
a little further down the maturation path. And number 2, hopefully it makes a current user contemplate a quit attempt.
Yeah.
And that might be the time for them to say, I'm done. I am not driving to Sturbridge to
Exactly.
buy cigarettes anymore.
That's a
I'm
far
quitting,
drive.
Yeah, so we're hoping that a lot of these things, and that is part of the, inconvenience of now that so many places are smoke-free, we certainly have heard a lot of people say, oh, I was tired of staying outside in today's heat or today's rain
Yeah,
or
exactly.
snowstorm. I was tired of going to a store in a snowstorm. I was tired of having to step out halfway through my meal at a restaurant to have a cigarette.
Yeah.
And so so that drove a lot of people to make a quit attempt. And if they didn't do a quit attempt, at least made them smoke far less because they
Yeah.
just didn't have they just couldn't light up wherever they were sitting.
Exactly.
I mean, there's you've seen black and white TV with
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Johnny
there's-
Carson reaching down for the cigarette
That one,
with
like-
the TV going.
Or in Mad Men, where it's like the 1950s and 60s, where you see them smoking in restaurants.
Yeah.
Next 2 weeks, actually, not next week, the Board of Health will be voting on this. So this is August 27th. First off, are you going to be there?
I won't be there because actually the National Tobacco Control Conference is in Minneapolis.
Oh, okay, so you'll be
a
there.
lot, so I and a lot of my counterparts will be at that.
Yeah.
However, Littleton belongs to a tobacco control collaborative.
Yeah.
And that tobacco, and she will be at it.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
and she's been doing this for as long as I have.
Yeah.
And she sits at Leominster City Hall, but she
Yeah.
has I don't even know 25 to 35 cities and towns in her catchment area, and Littleton is one of them.
All right. Do you have any final words for the viewer at home or food for thought?
I would say if you're a parent, be diligent about this stuff. Go on the website, see what, type in Google vape, see what comes up, because these are coming out in really interesting shapes and sizes and ways to do them, so you can be on the lookout for what your kid may be doing. The second thing is, and I said this at the beginning, is non-smokers typically don't walk into a convenience store, so they actually don't see the wall of product behind the cashier.
Yeah.
If you're a parent, the next time you need a gallon of milk, go into a convenience store and take your time and look behind the counter. Feel free to ask the clerk,
Yeah.
what's that product? What does that do? What flavor is that? How much does that cost?
Yeah.
And really get a better sense of the product lineup that your kids see all the time, right? Kids go into convenience stores because they're buying junk food or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But the parents aren't seeing this, so the parents really need to acclimate themselves as to what their kids are faced with every time they walk into a convenience store, and what they're seeing online for the next generation of vape, what that looks like.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time and your knowledge, because you've provided so much knowledge that I didn't know, or maybe the viewers at home didn't know, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much for watching Littleton Live. I want to thank our callers for being a part of this part of the discussion tonight. Next week, August 14th, we will be discussing whether the state of Massachusetts should lower the voting age to 16. Think about that and join us next week and give us your opinions on Littleton Live. I'm your host, Nicole Biagioni, wishing you a good evening, Littleton.